I'm Kurt Dupre, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the Porsche Taycan, the best EV that money can buy. At least that was the underpinning sentiment when the Taycan Cross Turismo won Chasing Cars Electric Car of the Year back in 2022. Fast forward to 2024, and the Taycan, it's Taycan with a Y, not Taycan with an I, has been updated and facelifted. We'll also cover off what's new, what's good, and what's bad, and the topic that often gets buried when it comes to the Taycan with a Y, is it any fun? Plus, do we still think that the Taycan is the best EV that money can buy? But first, let's cut to the action because I want to find out how quick this thing is.
5, 4, 3, 2.
60, 100.
Result, 2.57 seconds, which absolutely smashes the 3.16 best of the Tesla Model 3 Performance that up until a few moments ago was the quickest time we've ever recorded at Chasing Cars. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Unlike some YouTube jockeys out there, I don't have some background in engineering. But you don't really need one to comprehend that you can't actually turbocharge an electric motor. Or in the case of the Taycan, not really a Turbo S, 2 electric motors. Naming faux pas apart, that means 570 kilowatts or 700 kilowatts on an overboost. And no, that's not turbo overboost. Plus a stomach sickening 1,110 Newton meters. But it's not the most potent Taycan you can buy. The next step up is the Turbo GT, which gets 760 kilowatts and 1240 Newton meters. Acceleration claim for that, 2.3 seconds for 0 to 100. But you can tick the GT Weissach pack, which has the same power and torque, but drops performance to 2.2 seconds, 0 to 100. Those are some incredibly impressive figures for Porsche's debut electric that lobbed just under 5 years ago. Speaking of dizzying numbers, let's talk outlay. The range kicks off with a single motor just Taycan at $175,000, but gets serious with the dual motor stuff like this, not a Turbo S, and you're looking at $373,600, or about twice the amount. This rather interesting looking specimen here fits around 20 options, ranging from no cost to $17,000 for the active suspension. Some of the options, like the 1150 upcharge for the 21-inch RS Spider rims, are easy to swallow. But it's $720 for black side window trim and an extra $500 for things like black badging. So $373,000 quickly becomes $427,000, and that's before Ford Fairlane tax and other on-road costs. And then there's the paint. Porsche calls this Provence, as in the French winemaking region. But one imagines that this interesting shade of light mauve might have otherwise come about by blending wine grapes with Battleship Grey. But of the 18 regular and 65 different paint to sample choices, I probably would have chosen any other colour than this. Then there's the facelift. It's highly subjective, but I've never been sold on the Taycan's styling, particularly in the so-called sports sedan, though the quasi-wagon Cross Turismo almost wins me over. I get it, I just don't like it. And if you happen to buy a Vino-coloured four-door just like this and fawn over it in your driveway, well, good for you. Porsche's clearly on your side because it's evident the new Taycan doesn't fall far from the old grapevine. Squint, and you might lose the subtle massaging of the front wings and the front and rear fascias. And the old headlights, which made the car look like it's just stumbled in from a big night on gin and tonic, makes the new one look like, well, a big night on vodka and orange. Maybe there's some bigger changes on the inside which come about from a nifty little trick from that very expensive active suspension system. Grab either door handle and it kind of pops up like a startled pooch, giving oldies like me easier access into the cabin by about that much. Convenience or a gimmick? Let us know in the comments below. So clearly the colour scheme from the outside has migrated onto the inside. Now Porsche calls this combination bramble and crayon, though I like to think of it as Bordeaux and double brie. This car's making me hungry. Often overlooked inside the Taycan with reviews is how hard designers went to ape the 911 and how when you do sit in here, it does feel like an old race car. And really, are there any other production cars out here with a steering wheel that sits that vertically? It's still a little awkward for entry and egress in here, and the seat is set really low, but I'm constantly reminded that the Taycan does adhere faithfully to Porsche's rulebook for ergonomics. For the most part, the key controls fall neatly to hand and feet, and it feels like it's really designed to be a driver-focused tool. Even some of the adjustment controls here on the side of the digital screen land perfectly in your visual perspective. But it's not perfect. The 10.9-inch media screen, which is actually pretty small, is just outside of reach. Though this really neat little haptic touch control pad that adjusts things like aircon and the glass roof falls neatly to hand. It did actually take me a couple of days to realise that the passenger actually gets their own screen where you can watch Netflix or media or whatever you like, because from my perspective, it looks completely black. The aircon system, well, it's my real bugbear with this car because Porsche decided it wanted to take the well-worn, passive, conventional method and turn it into electronic aircon that's controlled through the touchpad. It's a bit clumsy, it's a bit distracting, and frankly, it's the low point for me in the cabin. The motion switch, or transmission selector, as other people incorrectly describe it, does take a little bit of getting used to. Porsche's convention is back for drive and forward for reverse, which works really well on a horizontal plane. When you put it on vertical though, it's down for forward and up for reverse. And I must say, I got that wrong more often than not over the first couple of days. These 18-way electric seats are absolutely superb with lots of lateral support for the heat of the moment and a heap of long-haul comfort. And the topic of comfort brings us to the Taycan's really big party trick, and it's called variable light control. The glass roof above can go from semi-opaque to clear at a touch of the button. Even better, you can use the control panel to adjust which sections of the roof you want to be clear and opaque. It's a brilliant response to our constant gripes of electric cars with glass roofs that always constantly let the heat in, such as Teslas and Hyundais. And if you don't like it, you can have your Taycan with a solid roof instead. But if you do want this party trick, it is going to cost you $7,000 atop your base, not a Turbo S. Other extras? Well, the wine and cheese themed two-tone smooth leather interior trim is an extra $1,000. The so-called Porsche design clock on the dash is an extra $2,000. And the leather trim inserts on the otherwise surprisingly hardy door trims does cost an extra $1,750. The purple seatbelts, it's another $1,000. And if you want the passenger media screen, that's $3,000. But the big ticket item in here is the Burmeister 3D audio, that's around $10,000. Even the air in here costs extra because the air quality system will sting you $890. Right, let's see what surprises are in the backseat. If you want a semblance of practicality, you do have to opt for Porsche's 4+1 seating, which costs another $1,000. It does add a seatbelt in the middle, but unless your +1 is a small Cocker Spaniel, it's best treated as a 4-seater. But it is a nice place to spend time in here. It does feel like a sports car. The rear seat is quite comfortable and there's plenty of knee room and a reasonable amount of headroom. 4-zone climate control is standard, hallelujah, and you can adjust it via touchscreen back here, and you do get 2 cup holders. However, I can't spot any device power, which does seem pretty strange. So it is well formed when it comes to being a 4-adult Grand Tourer. However, that's only if you're swinging a couple of overnight bags rather than large suitcases, as we'll find out when we get to the boot. This is a sedan rather than a liftback, so you do get 366 litres, which is pretty small for a vehicle that's nudging 5 metres long. And up front, you do get an 84-litre front, which you can open by this nice little colour match key here, $780. So far, so familiar, but the really big change with this facelift happens where you can't see it under the carpet. The update brings what's called Performance Battery Plus, and that's 105 kilowatt hours gross and 97 kilowatt hours net, and it's plumbed to 800-volt architecture. Officially, the range claim is around 600 kilometers NEDC. So in one neat and very remote package, the Not a Turbo is capable of grand touring for hours, and then in a moment's notice, it can dispatch 0 to 400 meters sprint in under 10 seconds. Or at least, that's what the claim is. Still, you can never trust those claims, so we put the Porsche through our own recharging and range test, and here's what we found out. On highway, the Not a Turbo S returned 566 kilometers of range with a consumption of 17.1 kilowatt hours. Equally impressive is that the recharge from 50 to 350 kilometers of range took just 12 minutes. The Taycan also has some neat tricks to eking out the range that it does. There are 4 different drive modes you can access through the Manettino dial on the steering wheel, which is Range, Normal, Sport, and get the heck out of my way, Sport Plus. In the first 2 modes, the Taycan disconnects the front axle in partial throttle conditions. But if you're off throttle like we are now, or at a standstill, it actually decouples both electric motors completely. And that freewheeling is said to reduce some of the losses that you get that's caused by drag on the move. And drive, which is single speed on the front axle and 2 speeds on the rear, re-engages instantaneously even if you think of touching the throttle. That does, though, sometimes make for a spooky experience because when you're off throttle, there's almost no motor braking effect whatsoever. And at times that freewheeling effect feels like you've accidentally activated some ghost-like cruise control. And the thing is, all this freewheeling trickery is absolutely seamless and you don't ever notice the electric motors ever clocking on or off. That said, the Taycan has long been one of the smoothest and most polite driving experiences of any car using any powertrain. And this Go Faster Turbo S is as impressive as any other variant. It brings this sort of luxurious ultra premium sheen that really makes this car just so relaxing to drive wherever you like. However, those big fat tyres can sometimes on road like this send up an unfortunate resonant boom. And much like the pre-facelifted version, it's not really that miraculous, the performance that Porsche can milk out of a 2.3 tonne vehicle, but it's how it can make it dynamically still feel genuinely like a Porsche. And that's no mean feat in a rig with a 2.9 metre wheelbase. And that's really not down to that optional active suspension that keeps the car billiard flat no matter how you lean in it in terms of pitch and yaw. I've driven a lot of Taycans with a standard adaptively damped air suspension and all of them still maintain those Porsche hallmarks. Porsche can still tune some of the best steering in the business, and this is typical Porsche. It's even and also fantastically precise. It makes that sort of darty effect that you get in a Tesla Model 3, particularly off-center, feel absolutely juvenile. There's a real poise to the dynamics and it's backed up by grip that's fierce enough to make this car feel like it's smeared across the hot mix when you do tip it into a corner. The change of direction is stunning and how this car can eat up even tighter roads is really quite remarkable. The brakes too are of a caliber that you would expect with a car of this kind of performance. So 10 piston front, 4 piston rear, 420mm front, 410mm rear, carbon ceramic rotors. But is it fun? Not by Porsche's usual lofty measures. It's not like a Cayman or a 911. It rewards smooth inputs and it's incredibly fast point to point, but it's not really the kind of high performer that really encourages you to hang its tail out. But that's really not to a fault, and it's not this car's brief. If you really want fun factor in an electric car, you're gonna have to stay tuned for the electric Cayman that should arrive in the middle of next year. Ownership-wise, it's fair to presume that some budding Not a Turbo S buyers aren't looking to seal the deal on cheap running costs. But the topics of time saved and convenience served are an entirely different matter. And with 566 kilometres of real-world highway range and just 12 minutes to top up another 300 kilometres, you could feasibly drive this from Sydney to Melbourne with just one 20-minute stop. But warranty is only 3 years. Come on Porsche, it's 2024. Though the high voltage battery does get an 8-year warranty. Service intervals are along 2 years and 30,000 kilometres, but there is no cap pricing, and the pricing will be determined by each individual dealer. Now that I've lived with a not really a Turbo S for a week, the lavender potpourri paintwork still refuses to grow on me. So kudos to our fine friends at Porsche Australia for having the brass tacks to choose this particular combination on a land-based missile fast approaching $500,000. But I have realised that thinking back, I've not ever experienced a car with just so much Jekyll and yet so much Hyde to deploy. And it does so with some of the longest range, quickest charging and most ferocious performance that we've ever seen in an electric. So logic suggests that yes, this is the best EV that money can buy, provided that you can stump up for the kind of money it asks for. But start to throw value into the equation and suddenly rivals such as Tesla start building a pretty strong case. Colour notwithstanding, this particular variant wouldn't be my personal pick. The better looking and more practical Cross Turismo Not a Turbo is more my lane. There are no S or GT versions in the wagon. However, as a clean skin, it lobs at 300 grand and at 2.8 seconds to 100, it'll still blow your socks off. So that's what I think, but how about you? Put your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.